An inaccurate show title. Inaccurate show title. Inaccurate show title.
What does that mean? What are you
It says The Dick Morris Show. It's the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show.
Oh, I'm wondering what he's doing.
Sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
First of all, we have a...
It's the inaccurate show
Beaver
alarm.
alert, beaver alert. We have a different thing. I'm not going to tell you what that's about. That's another thing. Beaver alert. This is
President
wrong.
Trump's thinking on tariffs has been evolving.
Get a little closer to your mic, Dick.
President Trump's thinking on tariffs has been evolving.
Good.
With each iteration, he became more committed to a broad program of tariff increases, but his motives for the tariffs haven't changed. At the start of the administration, Trump focused on the need to end discrimination against U.S. products and services by raising our tariffs to force other countries to lower theirs. He saw massive discrimination against our exports and was determined to end it. Why should we face tariffs of at least 10% from the EU on our car exports while we charge their cars only a 2.5% tariff? He was and is determined to end these disparities. But as the tariff debate broadened, he came to see another purpose in the tariff wars: to stimulate investment by both foreign and domestic companies in the U.S. economy. He raised tariffs on imports. He created a massive incentive for companies to come here and sell to our market from within our market. This increased investment in our economy is a way to stimulate our economy without kindling inflation.
That's so brilliant, isn't it?
It is.
That's
It's
just so
great.
brilliant.
To do that, he sees the supply side as the answer. Don't do what Biden did, artificially hype domestic demand by raising government spending, because that'll cause inflation, as it did with Biden. Instead, get companies to invest in the U.S. and sell their products abroad from their new base in the U.S. To facilitate the process, Trump will use tariffs to punch holes in foreign tariff walls to let our products through. He's succeeded so well, he's induced $8 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in new investment in the U.S. since he took office. Some by domestic companies, some by foreign ones.
That's amazing.
But as he warmed to the subject of tariffs, he has increasingly seen them as revenue raisers that might be so significant as to permit lowering the personal income tax in the U.S. By charging a flat global tariff of 10% in addition to the higher levies on Mexico, Canada, China, and the EU, he sees a fair prospect of raising $1 trillion in new revenue. Already his tariffs have brought in about $10 billion in new revenue in April alone, and most of them are still on pause. Now he pursues all three goals with the same policy. He raises tariffs to force others to lower theirs, while he uses these levies as incentives to investment in our own country. And with all these tariffs, the money for a dramatic lowering of U.S. taxes pours in. The Trump trifecta.
Wow. Triangulation.
Yep, absolutely. The Trump administration's increasing tariffs have given the government billions in extra revenue already, according to the Treasury Department. From April 1st to 28th, Treasury reported $17 billion in tariff collections, compared to only $10 billion in March, an increase of 72%. So not only are the tariffs driving companies to open offices and factories in the U.S., and opening foreign markets to our products and services, they're also bringing in massive revenue to our treasury.
So it's a twofer, basically.
A threefer.
A threefer.
He ends the discrimination. He gets companies to move here and generates revenues for a tax cut.
That's beautiful.
All with the same policy.
And how could the lefties
three birds with one stone
that were protesting yesterday not see this?
Remember that since colonial times, the tariff, not the income tax, has been the financial staple of the federal government. Trump's tariffs could in fact generate enough revenue to permit a huge cut in the personal income tax. Indeed, Trump is increasingly replacing the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, with the new External Revenue Service, the ERS.
Did you make that up? Did he?
No, they did.
That's great.
To fathom how fundamental this transformation may be when it's fully implemented, let's do the math. Trump's tariff deals could allow a cut in personal income tax in the U.S. of up to $1 trillion. Americans now pay $2.4 trillion in personal income taxes, so we're talking about a potential tax cut of 41%.
Wow.
Overall, Trump proposes a 10% tariff on the $4.1 trillion we import from the rest of the world. That would generate $400 billion, 10% of $4 trillion. From Canada, he calls for an additional 25% tariff on the $400 billion of imports, revenue $100 billion. From Mexico, he proposes a 25% tariff on the $474 billion of imports, revenue $120 billion. From China, he proposes a tariff of 125% on $438 billion of imports. Let's assume he has to settle for 60% after the bargaining is over. Revenue $250 billion. From the EU, he proposes a 25% tariff on revenue of $605 billion of imports. Revenue $150 billion. All these tariffs combined could generate over $1 trillion of revenues, enough to cut personal income taxes by 40%. Of course, there'd be retaliation from other countries, but our overall balance of trade was almost $1 trillion in the red last year. So the retaliatory tariffs would have to approach 100% to begin to wipe out these gains. So the Trump tariffs could herald an entirely new era for the American economy. The stimulative effect of one-third lower tax rates would be incredible. Wealthy people from all over the world would line up to come to America legally. And
pay that $5 million gold card thing? Uh-huh.
We would transform our country into a low-tax paradise. Economists have long pined for the day when our tax system would be based on consumption, not on income, because we don't discourage people from making money. Tariffs are a great way to achieve this. We could cut the tax on income and use the tariff revenues as a form of national sales tax instead. Not taxing us, but taxing foreigners. We would be taxed on what we spend and choose to spend on foreign products, not on what we earn ourselves. If we choose to pay less in taxes, just buy less in foreign products. With our increasing energy independence, even greater under Trump, we can impose self-regulation to hold down our tax burden. These changes would be monumental and would totally transform the American economy.
You know, Dick, even if the tariffs, if he changed it a little bit, he went down to 0 at some countries or 5%, then they're going to send us the stuff. That's going to be cheaper for us to buy those things that we're getting from those countries because they're going to relax their tariffs.
That's the traditional reason for raising tariffs, and Trump's going to do that. But there are these two other reasons, which is, one, he induces companies to come here because he's telling them if you move to America,
you're not
no tariffs.
Right.
And secondly, he's generating money for the Treasury he can use to cut taxes and stimulate our economy.
And number three, the prices will be less if they go with what he's doing. It's beautiful. All right, Percent says tariffs will bring tax relief. Here we go. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Tuesday that revenue from the President Trump's tariffs could be so great that it provides relief from the federal income taxes, just like you said, Dick. Bessent comment suggests the revenue from taxing import could offset the cost of massive GOP legislative effort to rewrite the IRS code. What are you going to call it, the ERS?
ERS, yeah.
I love that. I think there's a very good chance that we will see this in the upcoming tax bill, Bessent said. Beautiful, huh?
And Trump is going to expand the tax cut proposals that will be included in the budget he just filed to include full deductibility on income taxes for auto loans only for U.S.-made cars. So if you borrow money from GMC financing or somebody else to pay for your new car, the interest is tax deductible, but only if it's made in the United States.
Right.
And 100% immediate expensing for investment in equipment. Right now, you have to wait 4 or 5 years to get the investment recouped. He would do it immediately.
That's unbelievable what he's doing. And now this guy, I love this, Victor David Hansen. on trade. He said if Trump could cut a proverbial deal in the next 100 days that, say, cut the annual $1.2 trillion trade deficit in half, coupled with multi-trillion-dollar foreign investments, then stocks and bonds will settle down. Wall Street would go back to its traditional platitude that the trade deficit then would be no higher than 3% of the GDP, red line. Stocks would then soar in anticipation of other news of a continuation of tax cuts, more budgetary reduction, robust energy development, and further deregulation. If Trump were to settle with just China, Mexico, Canada, the EU, and then 10 nations Southeast Asia trading bloc, then the so-called trade wars would be over. Start with our North American partners, Mexico. It's $172 billion in surplus, and Canada, $63 billion in surplus. That alone accounts for 20% of the U.S. trade deficit. Canada's surplus is almost entirely attributable to its vast oil and gas sales to the U.S. Almost all its daily oil export go to the U.S., some 4 million barrels, as well as half its natural gas shipments. Canadian oil deposits are landlocked and far from port, so obviously Canadian crude is heavy, sulfurous, and difficult to refine for many nations' refineries, which we could do that. Moreover, Canada is one of the stringiest of NATO. Stingiest, right.
You should know that word.
Because of you? Canada is one of the stingiest of NATO partners. It's underinvesting in military readiness at only 1.3% of its GDP on defense, stonewalling its 2% commitment for over a decade. Should the Trump administration prompt Canada to invest 2% in defense, about $41 billion extra, and buy enough U.S. products to cut its surpluses, say by $10 to $20 billion of its current $63 billion, a deal could be and should be easily reached. Mexico's surplus is huge and growing at $171 billion. It is largely created by assembling cars, electronic goods, and appliances sent to it from other countries to enter into the U.S. market. That's why other countries send stuff to them, so they're not going to get tariffed. Is that how? That's what right. That's about, right?
It's rebounding. Now we're about to go into. We need a break, so let's pick up with Mexico when we come back.
Okay.
This is the Dick Morris Show on 77 WABC.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
We all know that owning a small business means you wear many hats, but sometimes you really need an extra pair of hands. Upwork is how good companies find great and trusted freelance talent. With more than 2 decades of experience, with the simple and ambitious goal of pioneering a better way of working, companies at every stage turn to Upwork to get things done and find more flexibility in staffing key projects and initiatives. They access a global marketplace filled with top talent in IT, web dev, marketing, and more. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, and get help drafting a job post or even book a consultation. From there, you connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them and take your business to the next level. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Doug is going through an article by Victor Davis Hanson, my hero.
He's great.
About how to cut the trade deficit with Trump's tariffs.
Right.
He had just talked about how Canada largely sells the U.S. its oil and gas. And with energy independence and U.S. production ramping up, we won't need much of that anymore. And now he's working on Mexico.
So he's, as I said, Mexico is taking stuff from other countries, building it, and then sending it in. So the other countries are sneaking in through the back door.
Yeah, so it qualifies under the U.S. free trade deal with Mexico, even though it's really made in Japan.
Right. So basically sneaking in through the back door. So Trump's going to ask Mexico to cut that $171 billion in half. Add in the $63 billion in untaxed remittance that Mexico expatriates sent home. Most senders are illegally residing in the U.S. Additionally, many are subsidized
by state and local American entitlements. So we give them free money, and they use it to send it to Mexico to their family.
Right. So to play, he wants to have an even playing field. So Trump could either focus on the cartels, tax remnants, or urge Mexico to buy more U.S. goods in a tripartite effort to reduce the outflow by half.
And then we get to China. We have much greater leverage on China than they have on us. We could stop issuing visas to 300,000 Chinese students a year. We could delist Chinese out-of-compliance companies from our stock exchanges, curbing all technological transfers that have military applications and key spare parts for their imported goods. We could then win a veritable Cold War. Unless Trump wishes an all-out trade war for now, he should aim at reducing the Chinese surplus by 300 to 500 million and seek some trade reforms, given China's violation of every international commercial canon. Then we get to Europe.
With their ironic fashion?
Well, Europe runs up a $235 billion surplus with the U.S., mostly from the surpluses incurred by Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, France, and Italy, which export massive amounts of pharmaceuticals, chemicals, cars, and machinery.
The U.S. spends most of NATO membership on defense and is largely responsible for prodding 24 of the 32 NATO members finally to meet their 2% obligations, and timely so given the subsequent Russian invasion of Ukraine. He wants our friends and allies to seek reciprocity, defined either as symmetrical or no tariffs, some reductions in then trade surpluses, and greater investment in the U.S. in preference of course to trade war. Trump knows that other nations privately concede they are taking advantage of the U.S. and are willing to renegotiate. With Trump, shows them some difference, cools somewhat the rip-off. He needs to cool the rip-off language and settles for gradualism. He has the moral high ground. To win this current tariff standoff, he needs to achieve instant trade parity, but perhaps instead only prod nations to cut their particular deficits with the U.S. in half, with schedule of more parity and further surplus reduction. You know what I'm going to say? He can calm himself, like Hanson's saying. He needs to cool his language of rip.
Yeah, but that's negotiating.
Right. But he could cool that if he wants, Trump, because he already proved that he's a tough guy and he's not bluffing.
Of course. And the U.S. economy is not in recession. Job growth, stable prices, increased energy production, and low prices and corporate profits are all encouraging in the March and April reports. News of an impending budget bill that extends tax cuts and deregulates, along with trillions of dollars, $8 trillion to be exact, in new foreign investments and budget disciplines will all fuel stock market gains.
The world may fear China, but it hates it even more, given its commercial bullying, trade mercantilism, or autocracy, and military buildup. For all their double dealings, the Europeans and our Asian partners will come to appreciate that someone is finally risking it all to bribe China into following global rules while deterring its expanding military.
So the what's going on now is the media is busy talking about how bad the tariffs are, how much they're hurting Americans, but the economic data doesn't show it. Our sales are increasing. We added 166,000 jobs last month. And by the way, on the jobs numbers, for the first time, there were more jobs given to native-born Americans than to those who came in from other countries. So all the data is very positive. We got $8 trillion in new investment. But the media is trying to feed the narrative that the tariffs are playing havoc with our country, and they're not. And what's going on is now a push-pull between the media saying stuff is terrible and the American people saying, no, it's not. If that sounds familiar, that's the same pattern as we had before the election of 2024.
Right. The White House said Tuesday it'll soon soften tariffs on automakers, sparking optimism in Detroit, whose car manufacturing industry has been on tenterhooks awaiting details on President Trump's fast-evolving policy. The measures, which include guarantee that a car maker wouldn't face multiple tariffs on the same vehicle. I wanted to ask you about that. Multiple tariffs, meaning parts coming in that are going to get tariffed. That's what I read this, I needed to know that that's what that meant. So they're not going to face the multiple tariffs on the same vehicle, and they're designed to prod U.S. and foreign companies to expand or rebuild new factories to support domestic manufacturing.
So Larry Kudlow, who is brilliant and on the station, by the way,
he's great,
says that the GDP is booming despite data showing it's dropping. The data for this last quarter, showed a 0.3% drop in the GDP. That's everybody hysterical. But Kudlow says that the recession talk sweeping through Wall Street and the press is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the latest GDP numbers and refusal to acknowledge the early effects of Trump's economic agenda. Kudlow took direct aim at what he described as media and Wall Street obsession with the headline 0.3% decline in real GDP during the first quarter of 25. The liberal press and their pals on Wall Street are talking about recession because the first quarter GDP scored with a decline of 0.3%. Yet if you look under the hood of the GDP report and carefully parse through the numbers, what you actually come up with is a rather strong economy that's growing at something like 3%. Kudlow pointed to what he called core GDP, a measure that strips out volatile components like inventories, government spending, and net exports. This narrower but more stable measure, formerly known as the real final sales to private domestic purchases, rose at the annual rate of around 3%. Trump has barely begun, but take a look at already rated core GDP, which takes out the flunky trade export numbers from tariff running and looks at the heart of GDP, which is private sector consumption plus private sector investment. We're looking at core GDP. You see an actual increase in the first quarter of 3%, no less. The strength, he argues, is being masked by a temporary surge in imports. What businesses are doing is they're saying Trump's raising tariffs on imports, so I might as well buy as many imports as I can right now before the tariffs take effect. And that reduces the growth of the GDP. But once that's over, which it is now, you won't see that. Kudlow writes, business fixed investment increased nearly 10% at an annual rate in the first quarter. And even better, business equipment and machinery, which is incredibly important harbinger of productivity, job increases, and real wage hikes, rose an incredible 22.5%. No recession there. Meantime, Trump has attracted $8 trillion in foreign domestic business investment.
More responsibility for driving economic growth and creating jobs to the private sector. A marked change from the Biden years when significant job gains were tethered to government spending. Since taking office in January, Trump has secured more than $8 trillion in investments from foreign and domestic companies looking to start or expand their U.S. operations. Those investments scattered across various industries are expected to generate at least 450,000 new jobs in America. Trump touted the investments at a White House event. It included top executives from companies that have made major commitments to invest in the U.S., such as Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, GE Aerospace, and SoftBank. Trump said the businesses are coming into the U.S. because of his administration's pro-jobs, pro-American economic policy. They're really coming in, he said. Some of them don't even bother calling. They just want to start their plants and start their factories. It's amazing. The total investment is more than 8 times the $1 trillion under President Biden, who relied on government subsidies and expansion of the federal government to create jobs. Mr. Biden spurred private industry investment through 3 large spending bills totaling in almost $900 billion. That's almost $1 trillion, huh? The differing approach underscores the contrasting philosophies of the two presidents. You talk about a dichotomy.
Yeah.
Right?
So in other words, what Biden tried to do was to give everybody more money in federal
by using
benefits.
our money.
More of our own tax money back to us. But what that did is we spent that money, and there weren't enough goods to absorb them. The supply chains were still screwed up by the pandemic, and prices soared. Now what Trump is saying, I'm not going to stimulate domestic demand. I'm going to stimulate foreign demand by cracking open their markets by American tariffs and by inducing companies to move here and create their jobs here. A totally different economic approach, and one that, frankly, much of Wall Street just doesn't get.
And like you said before, it's a threesome.
Yeah.
It's 3 different ways it's going to work. That's absolutely. Right. So stocks rose on Friday as Wall Street digested a better-than-expected non-farm payroll report for April, which eased recession fears and lifted the S&P 500 for its longest winning streak in just over 2 decades. The S&P 500 advanced 1.5% and closed at 5,686.67. This has marked the broad market index 9th consecutive day of gains and its longest winning run since November of 2004.
And as the economy bounces back and really begins to move, there's no inflation. Trump is holding inflation down.
All right. Trump on the campaign trail pledged to rapidly drive prices down beginning the day he took office. March data from the Bureau of Labor, which is the most recent information available, shows core inflation continued to ease and was at its lowest rate since March 2021. The average price of gas is down roughly 50% a gallon from the year ago, according to the AAA data. Pretty good.
And U.S. private sector employers kept up their demands for workers in late March. Hiring ticked up, layoffs fell broadly, and worker confidence strengthened, underscoring the labor market's resilience heading into spring. The number of private sector job openings remained above pre-pandemic levels, highlighting sustained employer demand for workers, even amid broader economic policy shifts.
And the growth is up 177,000 in April. Employed full-time workers increased by 300,000, while part-time employers increased by 56,000. The years-long gap in payroll growth among U.S. and foreign-born workers narrowed last month. Employed foreign workers declined by 400,000 from March to April, but employed American-born individuals increased by more than 1 million. So there's a nice plus.
Almost
right
500,000 jobs were lost by immigrants,
right?
And 1 million were gained by Americans.
It's unbelievable.
Now, unfortunately, that data does not separate legal immigrants from illegal, but you get the point.
Yeah, IBM's going to invest $150 billion in the U.S. IBM said Monday it it plans to invest $150 billion in the U.S. over the next 5 years. This includes an investment of more than $30 billion in research and development to further the company's America's manufacturing of quantum computers. The company operates one of the world's largest fleet of quantum computing systems and will continue to design and build and assemble those computers in the U.S. Quantum means super fast processing. The zeros and the ones, they could do it together, which no other computer does that. The quantum computer, it's just faster.
I've been saying quantum computers for 3 years now without knowing what the hell it meant.
It's just a lot faster. So what AI is coming from quantum. We got to take a break, but we'll go over this just a little more right after this. Thank you.
This is 77 WABC, and this is the Dick Morris Show.
Hi, welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
So,
big news from Walmart.
Yeah, before we get into that, the quantum computer thing, it's just super fast, and that's how they're creating this AI. It's just times 10. I'm not a computer scientist or a computer geek, but that's pretty much it. So, anyway, Walmart's announcing big increase in U.S. production. Walmart is supporting American-made products with the launch of new programs aimed at supporting American small businesses, underscoring the success of President Trump's tariff policy. On April 29th, the retail giant shared its plan to expand initiatives like Grow With Us program and the 2025 Open Call, designed to help American entrepreneurs thrive. This strategic shift highlights how Trump's tariffs are driving companies to prioritize domestic production, protecting both businesses and consumers from global trade disruptions. The Growth With Us program offers a force.
Well, that's a pun. It's growth with U.S.
Yeah, but you didn't put the period. No, I meant to ask you that.
Yeah, but that's the...
You didn't put the periods after
that's
U
the
and
pun. Growth with U.S.
Okay. Oh, got it. So should I say us or U.S.? What would you like, Dick?
Good choice.
I like us. The Grow With Us program offers a 4-step framework to provide U.S. small businesses with training, mentorship, and resource to grow alongside Walmart. John Furner, Walmart's U.S. president and CEO, emphasizes the benefits stated. We've seen firsthand how investing in small businesses result in better assortment, better meeting the needs of our customer base, and supporting jobs and growth in communities. CFO John David Rainey recently revealed that more than 2/3 of products in Walmart U.S. stores are already domestically sourced. So nice.
Yeah, that is nice. One of the things that I've worked on over the years is Brexit, getting Britain out of the European Union. And the leader of the Brexit campaign, who was my client for many years and is still my good friend, is Nigel Farage. And his right-wing Reform UK party saw a series of electoral wins early Friday after it secured a parliamentary, mayoral, and several local election seats in what Nigel Farage said is proof that Reform UK is now the opposition party to this Labour government. There's a Labour government in charge in Britain. The Conservatives are in opposition. And Farage's Reform Party is saying that they, not the Conservative Party, are really the opposition. Farage, who predicted earlier this year in an interview with Fox News that there would be a political revolution, said that the century-long two-party system that has dominated British politics is now dead after both the Liberal Labour Party and the Conservative Party saw losses in Thursday's election. Very important and very crucial. It's part of the global change that's advancing conservatives as Trump advances in the United States.
Dick, explain the three parties and what they are, conservative, liberal.
In Britain, it's a two-party system. You have the conservatives, who are also known as the Tories.
As what?
Tories. TRIES, and they are the Conservative Party, usually, and often in the government. Then the opposition is the Labour Party, which used to be the Liberal Party was the opposition. Then the Labour Party replaced it.
And were they?
And they're very left. And right now, the government in Britain was a conservative government, and now it's a left-wing government. But the opposition to that government is increasingly not just the Tories and the Conservatives, the traditional opponents, but the new political party formed by Nigel Farage, and to some extent by me, called the Reform Party.
Right.
And the idea is that we are opposed to the European Union. We're glad Britain pulled out of it. And we, the Reform Party, think more in terms of Atlantic coalition, Britain and the U.S. working together, rather than Britain and the continent working together.
Wow, so when you say in the middle, you mean in the middle of Britain and the U.S.
Right, that's true.
But so it's not far right, it's pretty, just a conservative
Well,
middle.
It's conservative, and the media says it's far right.
Right.
Because we want restrictions on immigration and all that stuff. Now, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, who I like very much, under Trump, said that the European nations need to reject climate alarmism and instead re-embrace natural gas and nuclear power as part of the continent continues to face widespread grid blackouts. This is one of the biggest flaws in the environmentalist movement. The Greens say we're in favor of only renewable resources like solar and wind and geothermal energy. But they not only reject oil and coal, they also reject natural gas, even though it has only half the carbon of oil. And they also reject nuclear power.
What's their reasoning behind this?
They want perfection. They want no carbon footprint at all.
Yeah,
zero.
sure. Okay, don't stop breathing.
Natural gas just gives you half as much.
All right. They should stop breathing.
So, Wright, our energy secretary, said Europe's net zero policies, which push a transition from oil and gas to green energy sources, such as wind and solar, to fight global warming, pose a threat to economic prosperity and national security. European leaders, according to Wright, should instead choose a path that ensures energy is abundant, secure, affordable, and reliable. The other side of the fork deprives citizens and consumers of choice. It's a top-down imposition of mandates for the energy system. This top-down imposition of enforced climate policies is justified naturally as necessary to save the world from climate change. But I can say that climate alarmism has clearly reduced energy freedom and hence prosperity and national security across Western Europe. Let me say that again. Climate alarmism has restricted freedom, prosperity, and national security. The clarion conclusion for the economic studies of climate change is that achieving net zero by 2050 is absolutely the wrong goal. Not only is it unachievable, but the blind pursuit of it will cause and is causing far more human damage than climate change itself could cause. And he also cites the sad cases of Spain and Portugal. The timing of Wright's speech is apt. It comes as Spain and Portugal both face massive power grid blackouts, in California too, a phenomenon that energy experts have warned will become more common as nations begin to rely more heavily on weather-dependent power sources such as wind and solar. These sources of power are often characterized as unreliable, so that they can't be dispatched at a moment's notice. Though authorities have yet to provide a reason for the event, solar accounted for about 55% of power generation, and wind accounted for another 11%, while natural gas accounted for just under 3%.
Wow.
It's very sad to see what's happening in Portugal and Spain, and so many people there, Wright said. But, if you hitch your wagon to the weather, it's just a risky endeavor. Mm-hmm. If you choose to have expensive, unreliable energy, you can't have a thriving economy, and you reduce the life opportunities for your citizenship. It's a choice, but it's a bad choice.
I always said, Dick, when we're gone, when the human when we're gone off this earth, everyone, the earth's going to flourish. But the other thing with what's going on with energy, when it becomes monetary, when people can make money at it, you know what I mean? When business can make money, they're going to figure out what's good. First of all, right now science is figuring out how to make things better all the time. Smaller batteries, smaller this, everything's happening. It'll happen. If you keep pushing it, this happens.
Yeah.
With Portugal
well,
and
what's going on
the
is
mandates.
The politics took over from the science. And the left said that the crucial thing now is to stop global warming and climate change. And they predicted the world would absolutely fall apart. The predictions were incredible. They said that there would be
the ice caps
an ice cap would melt.
Florida's going to be underwater.
Everybody would be underwater. There'd be massive coastal flooding.
Yeah.
Storms dramatically increasing in potency.
I say move out of the coast. Move in.
And the point is that there's been a switch away from reliable sources of power like coal and nuclear and oil and gas to unreliable, the weather, solar and wind. If the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you are out of luck.
The weather's like the weather.
Yeah, it changes like the weather. Yeah. Now, when we come back, we'll talk about Harvard and civil rights.
This is the Dick Morris Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Well, here's a perfect segue from what we just did, a Trump segue, about the House votes to end ban on gas-powered cars. Banning gas cars is widely unpopular. This may explain why every House Republican and Doug DePiro and 35 House Democrats, the biggest bipartisan vote on a green issue in recent memory, voted to let Americans drive the car of their choice. Right there, they're figuring that they know it. So,
well, during the election, I think the key thing in carrying Michigan and Pennsylvania and the states in that region was the EV car mandate.
Right.
And workers really got it that if we make electric cars, you're going to be basically having to close down the oil factories around the Midwest.
Forget the oil factories. The cars aren't going to stay.
Factory, yeah.
Forget that.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But the cars, everyone knew these cars aren't going to make it. And they'll make it in 20 more years from now. You know, once again, when the batteries get smaller and blah, blah, blah. But not now. And just to charge them, what does it take? Still 8 hours, 12 hours to charge one of these things?
Yep.
Forget about it. Anyway, Trump is to revoke Harvard tax-exempt status. This is a beautiful story. President Trump declared Friday that we're going to be taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status, saying it's what they deserve. The announcement from Trump comes after Fox News report last week that his administration asked the internal revenue, who's going to be the external revenue, as Dick Morris puts it, to revoke Harvard's university's tax-exempt status. The Ivy League school's failure to address anti-Semitism on campus is grounds for losing its 501c3 status, sources say at the time. So good.
And while that's going on, the Justice Department itself has changed its Civil Rights Division that used to be the people driving all this radical change on campus and in American life. They were the key people in pushing the DEA, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is basically reverse racism. But now the Civil Rights Division is changing. The department last week removed roughly a dozen career leaders from their positions, pushing some into unrelated roles responsible for public information requests and a complaint adjudication office. Many have since resigned, leaving many sections without any leadership beyond political appointees, and more departures are expected. Good riddance to them.
Bye-bye. Say bye-bye.
And Harvard has given to Trump and changed the name of its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office to the Office of Community and Campus Life.
Okay, bye-bye.
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 And what's pushing all of this is that the Republicans have finally gotten it together to raise taxes on college endowments. The Ivy League colleges have been socking away vast amounts of money. Harvard, I think, is over $50 billion of endowments.
Wow.
And nobody taxes them. The business, 70 billion. The businesses and rich people give money to Harvard. They take tax deductions for the money that they give, and Harvard pays no taxes on the endowment. Not no taxes. In his first term, Trump imposed a 1.4% tax on their net investment income. But the current endowment tax only applies to more than 500 paying students. An endowment is equal to $500,000 more per student. Only 56 schools paid a total of $400 million in the endowment tax. For example, Harvard's endowment, the largest in the nation with $53 billion as of 24, reported it paid only $44 million in taxes and fees. But the tax could soon take a much bigger bite. It's a threat of this that is causing such dramatic changes on campus. House members have proposed boosting the 1.4% endowment tax rate to 10%, 14%, and as high as 21%, which matches the corporate tax rate. Back in 23, when in the Senate, Vice President Vance proposed a 35% tax on investment income of college endowments.
Wow, what would that have
worth $10 billion or more?
Wow.
The Tax Foundation figures a 21% tax on endowment income would extract $70 billion from the wealthiest colleges over the next decade.
That's a 21%.
It's easy to see why endowments are such a tempting target. A survey of 658 schools that includes nearly all the richest ones found they scored an annualized net return of 11% in fiscal 24 and ended that year with a collective $900 billion in their endowments. And the schools spent only $30 billion from their endowments, half of it going to student scholarships. So how do we hold down the cost of college? What we do is we tax the endowments, and we use that money to subsidize students and cut back on the tuition, and at the same time make sure that the colleges have to have intellectual diversity, hire conservatives as well as liberals and Republicans as well as Democrats on their staff, end their anti-Semitic stuff, stop coddling people on foreign visas who come here to protest against American values.
And they're going to lose their tax status because
and take away
of that.
Their tax-exempt status.
So there's more money also.
Yeah.
I think we should just talk about this a little before we go into, or you want me to go into the next one? Dick, we got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
All right. The cultural issue.
Well, that'll take a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's just finish on this.
Yeah.
So what Trump has done is he has unwound the long trail that the left set up. They called it the Long March to all institutions that began with early schools and then middle schools and then colleges and then corporate boards and newspapers and TV networks and internet sites. And they're doing that. He's doing that by a combination of ending tax abatements and aggressive policies. We'll talk a little bit later in the show about how school choice, undermining the power over elementary and secondary schools, has now passed in 17 states, including Texas and Florida, big ones. And the teachers' union is losing its power. This is all unwinding the cultural march.
This is the Donald Trump's long march, or the conservative people's long march, and it's going to take us 5 years or 8 years. It's not going to take 40 years like it has taken them.
Yep.
And what about, Dick, the quality of the education?
Well,
it's going to be affected or not?
I believe that the quality will improve because they won't be feeding Marxist data to the students. They'll actually be thinking and talking and having
and diversity, diversity,
and they won't be constantly promoting people who can't do college work simply because of ethnicity.
So we got to go, but that was the great Luis Rosales, our south of the border guy. Thank you, Luis. We love you.
Hi, welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Trump has done an incredible job in keeping his campaign promises on cultural issues.
Yeah, but I like mine better. That was Living Color. Yeah. Those guys are bad.
That was Suzanne DeMello.
Yeah, whatever. Okay, so one of Trump's most consistent applause lines on the campaign trail came when he would tell supporters, typically at the end of rallies, that he'll keep men out of women's sports. He made good on that campaign rhetoric just weeks after taking office, signing an executive order to ban transgender men to women from competing in girls' and women's sports. The Pentagon reinstated a ban on transgender troops serving in the military, a move that has been caught up in the courts. On Trump's first day in office, he signed an executive order recognizing only two sexes, male and female, and directing federal agencies to cease promotion of the concept of gender transition. Trump has followed through on a number of other pledges on the campaign trail, including some controversial measures. On his first day in office, Trump pardoned roughly 1,500 people charged in connection with the January 6th Capitol attack.
And later in the show, we'll talk about how the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, now says that the blame for the Capitol riot is Nancy Pelosi's, not Donald Trump.
I know. I've been reading a lot of this. So anyway, the move surprised even some of his aides who had suggested Trump's pardons would be more targeted. Another major culture war issue that Trump took on during the campaign was ending diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI policy in the government. The Trump administration swiftly put federal employees in DEI roles on leave and moved to shut DEI-related offices. The president has also signed orders directing the Pentagon and State Department to remove DEI initiatives. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay,
actually,
bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
140,000 illegals have been deported as of right now under Donald Trump.
Had to listen to this
140,000. And during the campaign, everybody said, you can't deport everybody. What are you
going to do? How are you going to get him? And he did it. He's amazing.
And more coming.
So anyway, there's a good song we have here, too. It's The Singing Walrus. That's why you understand it. Oh, my goodness. This show is really going downhill. Border czar Tom Homan noted that during much of the Biden administration, crossing at the southern border averaged between 11,000 and 15,000 each day. He said, you know what the number was the last 24 hours? 178. So from 11,000 to 15,000 a day to 178. Wow. In another stark contrast with the Biden administration, Homan said just 9 undocumented immigrants have been released into the U.S. during Trump's opening months in office. Last year, that number was 184,000. It's amazing. Homan asserted Biden unsecured
our borders on purpose.
On purpose. He estimated there were at least 20 million undocumented immigrants leaving the U.S., with 700,000 facing criminal charges earlier this month. Noam said 20 to 21 million people need to go home.
Yeah, incredible. And Trump is really cracking down aggressively and very well on sanctuary cities, which are basically state and local jurisdictions that have passed ordinances and laws instructing their people to disobey federal law. And when the feds come in and try to round up people they're here illegally, the local law requires them not to cooperate.
Yeah. Trump administration announced it would attempt to shame state and local authorities that aren't cooperating with its mass deportation effort, a campaign it described as still in the beginning stages, even as the White House, President Trump is ordering Attorney General Pam Bondi and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem to publish a list of state and local governments that they say have obstructed federal immigration enforcement. The order authorizes Bondi to pursue legal action, including potential criminal and civil suits against state or local officials obstructing criminal or immigration law enforcement.
So if you bar the ICE agents, you don't let them in, You say you're a sanctuary city and you're going to protect illegal immigrants. You are going to be busted and let out of your office in handcuffs.
That's it. And he also signed an executive order kicking off a crackdown on sanctuary jurisdictions such as Chicago, Los Angeles, and all of New York after previously calling for the federal funding to be cut. Bondi previously paused her department's funding for sanctuary jurisdictions, but the Trump administration has not yet issued orders to pull back the federal funds. It's quite simple, Leavitt said. How do you say her last name? Leavitt. She's great. Said Monday morning, obey the law, respect the law, and don't obstruct federal immigration officials and law enforcement officials when they are simply trying to remove public safety threats from our nation's communities. Trump had publicly floated a broad pullback of billions from states and cities that don't cooperate on deportation.
Good. I'm hoping our friend Luis Rosales, who is my fellow political consultant in Latin America, we're partners all over the continent and in much of Europe.
South of the border, Luigi.
South of the border.
South of the border, Luigi.
We actually worked in Kenya together once. And but here's a good story here about the TPS, Temporary Protected Status visas, for 500,000 Venezuelans.
First of all, I will recommend you to organize a popular contest.
Whose songs are better?
The song.
I think so.
Whose song is better?
Whose songs are better?
We have a lot of audience, so they can vote.
So when we play a song, I'll say song from Doug or song from Dick, one or the other, and then let the people check off.
And at the end of the show, they can reveal the results.
Or the next show, next week's show. We'll do it the week later. You say,
okay,
it's a
good idea. And talking about Dick's question, there was a kind of course, Venezuelans were suffering a lot because they suffered a dictatorship since Chavez years, so for more than 20 years. So they have some reasons and reasonable rights to be considered special and some kind of state
and
to special
worked like hell to overthrow Chavez.
Yeah, exactly.
The elections one after the other, all of which Chavez lost, but the government wouldn't recognize it. And then Chavez imported police from Cuba.
For Cuba,
who basically were military police who patrolled the streets.
And Secret Service. Secret Service for Cuba as well.
Made it a dictatorship.
And, of course, the Venezuelans suffer a lot. But taking advantage of this situation, the Venezuelan government organized a kind of gangs to be exported to the United States in a very well-organized plan. It wasn't just a matter of coincidence, or
like infiltration.
Random. Yeah, it was infiltration.
Huh.
The Tren de Aragua.
Wait, when was this? When? Oh, circa.
Maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
They started to smuggle people and then also narcotics, drugs, taking advantage of their proximity to Colombia, the main cocaine producing country.
Through Mexico?
No, directly from Venezuela.
Really?
Maybe, yeah. Venezuela is in the other side of the Caribbean Sea, so it's not so difficult. And they have the cartel of Los Soles. Soles Sans means because everybody in Venezuela knows that this cartel is organized and controlled by the generals of the army, and the generals have stars, soles, suns like instead of stars,
right.
Because they're golden. You have in the U.S. Army stars.
Yeah.
General, one star general, two star generals.
Yeah.
In Venezuela, they have soles, suns.
And the gangs were named after that.
Tren de los Soles, because Cartel de los Soles, because it was organized and controlled by the generals, and el Tren de Aragua, which was very compromised in the smuggling of people and drugs. And they are very, very dangerous organizations. And they were practically controlled by the Venezuelan government, taking advantage of the generosity of the United States, opening the doors to really suffer.
How much money was generated in that
A lot of money, and a lot of disruption in the U.S. That was the Chavistas' idea to generate problems, disruption, chaos.
So Homeland Security Secretary Christine Noem revoked the policy of letting the Venezuelans in. It led to a lawsuit filed by immigrant groups in San Francisco federal court challenging her decision. Despite the exodus of millions as Venezuela's economy collapsed, Noem recently found that these protections for Venezuelan immigrants run contrary to the national interest of the U.S. The court then ordered them to let the immigrants in, and Noem protested that. What it was that they went to a federal court in San Francisco that's very leftist.
I was just going to ask
that would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
The judge said Noem had acted on broad generalizations and stereotypes when she revoked the deportation protections and work permits from about 350,000 Venezuelans benefiting from protected status. He wrote, it's evident that the secretary made sweeping negative generalizations about Venezuelan TPS recipients, acting on the basis of a negative group stereotype and generalizing such stereotype to entire group is the classic definition of racism.
Of course.
Now, that order is going to be thrown out on appeal. I'm sure that those folks will be kicked out of the United States. But Trump has to fight tooth and nail to do that against the left, which is basically trying to keep these gang members in the United States, preying on the American people.
I want to always know why. Why they would want gang members, why Americans want gang members in our country.
They're the left. They want to destabilize our country. They want to...
Even the left, Americans.
Yeah, Americans.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. No S, Sherlock.
Just say he's got the beat button ready.
When we come back, we're going to talk about how Mexico has already let 40,000 immigrants return to Mexico.
This is the Dick Morris Show on 77 WABC.
Mexico has received nearly 39,000 immigrants deported from the U.S. since the start of Trump's administration, 33,000 of whom were Mexicans. Now, we have to understand how President Claudia Sheinbaum is really risking her butt with this program.
Politically, you mean? Yeah, sure,
yeah.
Of course.
Because she's offending the cartels, hurting the cartels, and readmitting their hitmen into the into Mexico. The Mexicans were very happy when they fled to the United States and got the hell out of the way.
Yeah, get out.
But now they're coming back, presumably bringing their guns with them.
Okay, bye-bye.
It's really importing a civil war into Mexico that they thought they had exported to the United States.
Well, that goes to show Trump's strength.
Yeah.
Trump's strength right there, that she's doing that. So, and Trump demands truck drivers to speak English. Social media in favor of President Trump's plan to sign an executive order requiring commercial truck drivers to speak English. Trump would sign the order Monday evening because President Trump believes that English is a non-negotiable safety requirement for professional drivers. Last month, Trump designated English as the official language of the United States.
Now, that's English as opposed to hand signals. The truck drivers
hand signals
using their hands instead of their voices.
You got to see what he's doing. It's
and
not
we know
nice.
Essentially what they're saying.
Listen, I have a 52 Harley, a 57 Harley, no blinkers. I have to use hand signals, and sometimes that's a straightforward one, not the one you're just doing right there. Anyway, so
the latest big controversy is over this horrible guy named Garcia. What's his full name?
Whatever.
And Trump got into a debate with Terry Moran, the TV newscaster, about Garcia.
Yeah. And Moran tried to. I think you said it wrong. It's moron. Terry Moran tried to get Trump to acknowledge that under our law, every single person who gets deported gets a hearing first. But President refused to agree with that legal point. When Biden allowed 21 million people to flow into a country, did we give them hearing when they came in? No. Trump asked a newsman, who continued to insist that the law requires every migrant deported that gets deported to receive a hearing first. Trump indicated he would ask the lawyers about that, but maintain that trials for 21 million people result in too slow a process. So first of all, why? Just why? I don't understand.
They want the votes.
They want
those people to come into the U.S., become citizens,
and
vote.
And the numbers for districts.
Yeah,
that they put the people in certain districts.
And with the
explain that.
Okay, with normally with illegal immigration, they come across the border illegally and they settle where they can, and
sanctuary cities
or any place they can find. But under TPS, temporary protected status, they go to the airport in Caracas. And the flight attendant says, "Where would you like to go?" And they say, "I'd like to go to Detroit because Michigan is a sanctuary area for illegal immigrants." And the woman books a flight to Detroit. You pay for it, the taxpayer.
Nice,
because this is a persecuted person.
Oh, of course.
And they fly to Detroit. They get off the plane and they settle there, and then they vote Democrat. So it's an effort to continue that.
But we know that they've been switching a couple of years later to conservative.
Yeah.
Because they fled
After
a country.
They make a little bit of money and they become Republicans.
And they got to pay taxes and it goes to different people.
Yep.
Plus, they fled a country that had tyrants running that country, and now they see the Democrats are going to be the tyrants running the country.
So one of the things that has been, you have to ask why some congressmen became very, very wealthy. Was it bribes? Was it payoffs? Was it kickbacks? I think the most important thing was stock trading. The members of Congress would learn what the policies were. They would figure out what effect that would have on the stock market, and then they'd go ahead and buy the stock. And Nancy Pelosi's husband made tens and hundreds of millions of dollars doing that. And so Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, who may be a Republican candidate in 2028,
he's great,
put in legislation that would ban members of Congress or their families from being able to trade or hold stocks. He called it the Pelosi Act.
I love it.
It would ban lawmakers and their spouses from holding, purchasing, or selling individual stocks for the duration of the lawmaker's term in office. If the Pelosi Act is passed, lawmakers would have 180 days to comply with this legislation, according to a press release. So this puts the Democrats in a very tough position. Are they going to filibuster this and kill this in the Senate, or are they going to allow it to pass? And their leader of their party has to basically stop insider trading.
They're going to lose some money.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Now, while that's going on, our friend Kash Patel, the head of the FBI,
nice guy,
said that that Pelosi was responsible for not requesting the National Guard on January 6th after President Trump constitutionally authorized deploying the Guard. Patel said, "We submitted the best evidence, their own written refusals, to the partisan January 6th committee. They excluded them from the record despite agreeing to include the letter and timeline." Pelosi, this is the head of the FBI talking, Pelosi did more than just create the unlawful and unconstitutional January 6th committee. She hid evidence directly relevant to a congressional investigation, lied to the world, and decided to spend January 6th filming a movie of herself. The sweeping changes came less than 3 weeks after the swearing in of Harmet Dillon, Trump's Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, former co-chairman of Lawyers for Trump. Dillon backed Trump's efforts to challenge the 2020 election and defended him in a Colorado lawsuit trying to bar him from running for office. So gradually we're seeing the facts emerge about January 6th, that as soon as Trump got word that there was going to be this demonstration,
right,
he was afraid of a riot. He was afraid that it would result in deaths. And he asked that the National Guard be summoned to protect the rioters and the police and the public.
Not a very good Nazi, if he's doing that.
Yeah, right.
He's not very good.
And under the law in the U.S., the governor of Maryland and Virginia and the mayor of D.C. have power over the Guard, not the president. So he went to them and asked them to please exercise their power to give him 10,000 troops to keep the riot from becoming violent.
Right.
And they refused. And the riots became violent, and Pelosi used that to demonize the Republican Party.
And now she's hiding some information,
Yeah.
like Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
Didn't Liz Cheney?
Right. And now, but the point is that increasingly it's coming out that she was central in that. This is just like, and I said it at the time, in 1933, Adolf Hitler burned down the Reichstag, the German parliament. And he did so because he had lost an election. He got 44% of the vote. He needed 51. And he couldn't take power with 44%. So he had his people burn down the Capitol, the Reichstag, and then blamed the communists for it. And said because of this he needed martial law and all of Hitler's powers that then ran Germany for the next 15 years came as a result
From that,
of that
really?
fire. And Pelosi did the same thing with the Capitol riots and tried to use it as an excuse to round up people on the.
Well, she
on
got
the left.
Biden. She got Biden in there going on.
right.
She's tried. It almost worked. But Netanyahu, this guy's great. Israel will only agree to a nuclear deal with Iran that eliminates Tehran's capacity to enrich uranium. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told the JNS International Policy Summit on Sunday, the only way to prevent the Islamic Republic from building a nuclear weapon is to dismantle all the infrastructure of Iran's nuclear program. That's the deal, he said. Israel, he continued, cannot live with anything short of that. Anything short of that could bring the opposite result, because Iran will say, all right, I won't enrich. They'll wait and then run out the clock, wait for another president and do it again. This, he said, was unacceptable. According to the prime minister, a bad deal is worse than no deal. And the only good deal that works is a deal like the one that was made with Libya that removed all the infrastructure. He declared echoing remarks he made during the April 7th meeting at the White House. He emphasized that while it is important that Jerusalem and Washington share the same goals, we have to make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. In addition to eliminating Tehran's ability to enrich uranium, the prevention of Iran's development of ballistic missiles should also be addressed, he continued. I think these are two requirements. I said to President Trump that I hope that this is what the negotiators will do, he said. But I said one way or the other, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Thank God for this guy.
So right
Actually,
now
God
you're
is
having
pretty-
negotiations between Iran and the United States. And while Trump is negotiating, we're flying bunker busters into the Middle East. They're capable of burrowing down thousands of feet and blowing up the places where the Iranian nukes are stored.
The mother of all bombs, the Moab,
exactly.
I think this called.
We're stopping Iran from selling its oil, cutting off its revenue supplies. And Trump is negotiating while he's tightening the noose around Iran. I suspect that in the next few weeks, there's going to be a war with Israel and the U.S. striking Iran to eliminate its nuclear facilities.
I feel it coming.
And I think it's coming, and I think these negotiations are cover for that.
Yep.
Because it's obviously going to happen.
Yeah, Iran will do stall. Okay, we'll do it here. Let me show you what I'll do for you. And then while they're building it. Could you imagine if Harris was president right now? They would have that bomb built already.
Absolutely.
And she'd be telling everyone how horrible Netanyahu is and all that business.
So Trump called for all countries to stop buying Iranian oil.
For that one good reason.
And said that any country that didn't could not do business with the United States in any way, shape, or form. So you take a country like China that basically buys most of Iran's oil. They sell $500 billion of stuff to the United States.
Who's they?
China.
Yeah.
Unless they want to get a total cutoff of that and not a dime from that, they have to stop buying Iranian oil. So those kind of sanctions have real teeth.
Wow.
And really
going to
aggressive.
Strangle Iran.
And on top of that, we're also sanctioning ships that are bringing Iran oil and confiscating
and the captains of the ships, right? He's right. I mean, this guy's going at it, man. He really is. You know, he's looking at what's going on and says, I'm stopping this. I don't care what I have to do. This is going to end. Look how he got rid of ISIS. He blew up half those oil fields that they owned, right? And everyone said, oh, you can't do that. They go, bull. He goes, no beep button. No beep button.
The commander of the joint U.S.-Canadian North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAL, told the House Armed Services Committee that he envisaged President Trump's Golden Dome missile shield as multiple overlapping defense domes capable of defeating anything from high-altitude ballistic missiles to lower-flying threats such as cruise missiles and unmanned aerial systems. Air Force General Gregory M. Gillot, who wears two hats as the head of the U.S. Northern Command, along with NORAD, told lawmakers that they are taking immediate actions to implement Trump's January 27th executive order directing the building of a missile shield defense for North America.
Good.
The first dome will focus on the area from the seafloor to space, General Gillot said. It remains the most critical priority for deterring and defeating missile threats to the homeland. The second tier will rely on U.S. ground-based mid-course defense systems, which is fully capable of defending against a missile attack from an adversary like North Korea. The difference here is that if the attack were to come from Russia or China, it would be in the outside of the Earth's atmosphere. It would shoot up into space and come down.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it comes from a less sophisticated source like Iran or the Palestinians,
intercontinental,
it would be suborbital.
Right, intercontinental ballistic.
And as such, you could shoot it down basically the way Israel does with its Iron Dome.
Right.
The third dome will defend against lower-altitude threats such as enemy aircraft, land-based cruise missiles, and unmanned aerial systems. To ensure effectiveness, the three modes must be resilient, interconnected, and tailored to defeat specific threats. Developing these defenses and associated policy guidance that reflect the strategic, complex environment and the reality of a homeland at risk will be crucial in the coming years, the general said. So this is all part of the Iran negotiations, making sure that nobody can strike us. It's amazing how Israel has been the subject of literally tens of thousands of missile attacks without any of them hitting, without killing anyone.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And that technology was developed by the U.S. and by Israel together. And now it's going to be deployed to defend the U.S.
And that's why Netanyahu was back in power.
That's right.
Right. What is it? Is this his third term or four? How many? Like 4 or 5 or 17?
He's a former client of mine, so I don't count.
And John McLaughlin, our boy John McLaughlin sees him a lot, right?
When we come back, we're going to talk about the most incredible developments in public education. 17 states have now approved full school choice programs.
Wow.
The end of the teachers' unions' power.
That's so good.
This is 77 WABC, and this is the Dick Morris Show.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Let's go to Sandra in New Jersey.
Hi, Sandra.
Your show goes uphill, not downhill, every week. It gets better and better, funnier and funnier, more information. It's just so great.
Thank you. I'm the funny guy, right, Sandra?
You really are, Doug. You make me laugh.
He's the straight man.
I love the song "Going Home." Whoever picked that one, that was great.
That's me.
I have two important things I wanted to say. One regarding the electric cars. This is interesting. It shows you Biden's no angel with tariffs because in Trump's first administration, Trump had the tariff to 25% for the electric cars. When Biden became president, he made it become 100%. So he's no angel with tariffs. And then I wanted to ask you, Dick and Doug, I learned this week, but I didn't get a reaction from anybody when China blames the United States that we caused the COVID virus. Did you react to that, Dick? I know I did.
I didn't even hear that.
Well, they've been saying that for years.
Yeah.
But it's very clear that it came from a lab leak, and it's very clear that, to me, that the lab leak was not clear, but I believe the lab leak was deliberate.
It was obvious.
And the question is, what business did China have developing a virus that was designed to become more lethal and more communicable than it was in its natural form?
And not securing, its safety.
But now it's gone to the next question, which is, was this paid for and financed by the United States? Did Fauci do it? Fauci clearly funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, which was where they went ahead and did this, and then lied about it to Congress. And that's why Biden pardoned him. That's why Trump unpardoned him, revoked the pardon. And we'll see what happens. But the debate is now moving into its really sophisticated phase.
And of course, China's going to say we didn't do it, or somebody else did. Of course, they're going to do this. Like a kindergarten kid punches a kid in the face and says, "I didn't do that," and they all saw him do it.
Yeah, but
that's what they do.
6 million dead.
Yeah, horrible.
8 million dead, horrible. I think, as a result of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you,
Let's
Sandra.
go to Wendy on Long Island.
Hi, Wendy.
Doing a stump grinding instead of
right.
Hello, Wendy.
Is in your mind, did you already think you had approval to just come here and cut the?
Wendy, hello. Okay, we are Wendy. Okay. Let's go to Eduardo in Tampa.
Hello, Eduardo.
Hey, good afternoon, Crockett and Tubbs. I saw your story there about the possible remake coming up, so I got to say that's good news to hear about that. Moving on to Israel and the Houthis attacking Ben Gurion over there in Israel. China is using there's a satellite company called Changguang. I don't know if you heard of it.
No.
So I think they're helping the Houthis with these attacks over there in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
What's your comment on that?
Yeah, well, we're already doing everything we can against China. And, you're looking now at China in the process of folding. They signaled it last week when they announced they were not going to impose tariffs on about a third of the things they sell to us. And, that we sell to them, showing that they needed that stuff. And they backed down on that. And now they're backing down on everything. This is going to be a major Trump win. The only question in my mind is, will it be significant enough to force regime change in Beijing? I think Xi is going to have a lot to answer for when he meets with the Politburo. And they say, why were we outmaneuvered in this trade war with the United States? Why did you launch it? Why did you start it? And I think that just as Khrushchev was ousted and Gorbachev took over, and then later Yeltsin was ousted and Brezhnev and the hardliners took over. I think in China, just as Deng was ousted, Mao was ousted and Deng took over, and then Deng was ousted and Xi took over, and now I think Xi is going to be ousted and somebody else will
without a military fight.
No, I don't think it'll be a fight. I think it'll be a vote of their Politburo.
Wow.
I think that the system will control. But you've studied China,
yeah,
Luis.
What do you think of that?
Yes, China is always very stable. Probably the Communist Party, if they believe that X's policies are failing, probably they change the leader.
Yeah,
and the idea of leader for life was relatively new because in the after Mao, they started to do to have a system of 5 years mandate renovated by another 5 years, 10 years, and no more.
Mm-hmm.
And she is in his third term right now of 5 years.
And his policies are such a...
Hold on, he passed his 10th year. He's in the third of 5 and 5.
Yeah.
And his economic policies have ruined the Chinese economy. He's gone back to Maoist Cultural Revolution policies that eliminated the private sector, basically, and have made China communist again. And internationally, he's become the enemy of the U.S., and gotten himself involved in a trade war he can't possibly win.
Generally speaking, Dick, the Communist Party of China doesn't commit suicide like the Communist Party in the Soviet Union.
Meaning, explain.
At the end of the day, they change.
Got it.
They change.
They don't upheaval the whole government.
Yeah, because they know that they cannot stand forever.
Let's go Tony in Providence.
Thank you, Luis.
Hey, Tony. Hi, Tony.
Tony the Tiger says this show is girl.
Thank you.
That's
great.
Great.
And
thanks, Tony.
And Sal on Long Island.
Hey, Sal.
Sal.
Hey, Mr. Morris. Thanks for taking my call. If the Luigi Mangione guy doesn't get the death penalty, it's possible that we will elect president one day who's going to pardon him. I have a dozen in my mind.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Mangione is being held on federal charges of attempted murder, and the state it can't be. I'm sorry, state charges, and a federal pardon wouldn't affect him. So no, I don't think so. But I don't think New York will use the death penalty. I think he's going to be with us for the rest of our lives.
Creep.
As our guest.
And there's people protesting for this guy.
Let's go to Wendy on Long Island.
Hi, Wendy. Got your back.
Yeah, hey there, Dick. Hey there. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. I'm just wondering if you could comment on Marco Rubio's support for the extreme anti-Semitic party in Germany, and how now they've been Germany basically threw them out and made their party illegal. So can you just comment on how it appears that
first, Rubio is not supporting them. The U.S. doesn't have a candidate in that race, although it is clear that the conservative is preferable to U.S. policymakers. But the ATF, I think it's called, AFP, is not Nazi. It's not anti-Semitic. It's been branded that way by the centrist parties in Germany that try to capitalize on fear of the return of the far right to stop anti-European forces from winning in Germany. In Britain and in France and other countries, the parties that oppose integration with Europe have been winning elections hand over fist, and the Germans are afraid that the AFP would win in Germany. So they've been branding the parties anti-Semitic. They've been saying that they're Nazi. They've been trying to ban them. But I don't think those charges are true. And I don't think the U.S. will intervene. But I think that we have to take those charges with a big grain of salt. Thanks for your call. Go to Rick in Westchester.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Dick, Dave. I want to ask about this tax bill with the overtime. Overtime is going to be income just based on the overtime. We won't be paying taxes on the overtime hours?
Yeah, that's correct. That's his proposal, and it's in the new tax bill. So that when you work overtime, the amount you make in overtime pay will not be taxed as income. So you get tax-free treatment with that, which is very important because American workers need to be rewarded for their overtime work, and this is a great way that we can do it. I think it's going to pass in the current tax bill, so I think you can use it for this year, but I wouldn't bet on it until it actually happens.
Speaking of taxes, 1.5 million people left California, and
Yeah.
In 2020 and 2024, and 500,000 left New York.
Yeah.
From the millions.
When we come back, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Good.
This is the Dick Morris Show on 77 WABC.
Billy Joel has a good comment about the people leaving California and leaving New York because of the taxes.
I don't want this contest right now.
1.5 million people have left California in the last 4 years, and 600,000 have left New York during that period of time. People voting with their feet. Those are net figures. More than that have left. That's net of those that came in. So a big change. And in terms of Congress, that's 2 congressional seats in California and 1 in New York. And that's pretty significant.
The one problem I have with this is they left California and New York. They're going to go to a conservative state and try to make it blue.
No, that's not happening. People
I know.
thought about that. But Florida, which is where most of them go, and Texas have become more conservative, not less. Republicans are doing better in those states. When they move, they leave their crazy ideology at home.
Right.
And they move in and adopt the
So these must be
the place they're going to.
More Democrats in the middle that are saying, "I'm getting out of here." I don't. You don't think they're
Republicans?
Go on, Louise. Well, go on, Louise.
In some sense, it's the same than with the Latin Americans, that they are moving from leftist countries to right-wing countries.
Right.
And inside the United States, people are moving from leftist states to right-wing states.
Yep.
But I find that the Latin Americans
people are
more
escaping.
Christian, so they're usually more conservative.
No, but people escape leftist craziness
Just because it's crazy.
Yeah,
sure,
exactly.
To get out of the hatred.
One of the major changes that's taking place, as important as the deportations and the immigration reform, is the changes in the school system in education. 17 states have now adopted school choice bills. They are Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Arizona, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, West Virginia, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, Alabama, and Florida. And those are about a third of the country. Now, in those states, the state government takes the money that they would normally give public schools and gives it to a special fund that offers scholarships to kids who graduate, who are up to high school or up to that grade in school, and they get to attend church schools or private schools or charter schools free of tuition. And funds that would normally go to support the public schools get diverted to go to these charter schools.
I got to ask you, was that a bill that was passed in those states that they could do that? Because it wasn't originally
each
for
of
that.
those states have passed that legislation.
So they have to go through the legislation.
Oh, every one of them.
Right.
It's been a fight in every single state. The 2 biggest ones were Florida, where DeSantis pushed it, and Texas, where Governor Abbott signed it. And it amounts to a revolutionary change. The key elements in funding and promoting the Democratic Party are the municipal unions. In the last 20
the teachers
years,
unions,
and all the other public employee unions, the percentage of the private workforce in America that belongs to labor unions has dropped to about 6%. From a high of about 25% in the 30s.
Wow.
And at the same time, the percentage of public employees who are members of unions has gone from very small to more than a third. So the union movement in America has become mainly a public sector movement. And the reason they do that is, of course, that they can't strike against the private sector because they just close their factories and move to another country.
Right.
And
there's a lot more private
state.
people working than union people. So if they strike, they just get guys to work, take their jobs.
Right.
That's another part of it.
So I think that that the whole union movement is now centered on public employees. And the largest of those is the teachers' union. There are 34 million teachers in the United States. And and about 27 million of them are members of the teachers' union.
Wait, say it again. How many in the teachers?
About 27 million in the teachers' union.
And how many were there?
About 34 million teachers in the country.
So, okay.
And and those funds that they give the teachers' union are the mainstay of the Democratic Party. Now, more and more, the growth of charter schools and school choice is creating a tipping point where fewer and fewer people are paying union dues, and the power of the unions decreases dramatically, and its ability to elect Democrats also decreases dramatically. So these are huge changes that are taking place. They're not in Washington, they're not federal, so they don't dominate the headlines as much, although much of what Trump does dominates it. They're really making enormous changes under the surface, under the radar. And very soon the Democrats are going to find that they cannot raise money from the teachers' union because the union doesn't exist, or it's not very powerful. And the teachers' unions in the states where they have school choice have to watch their step. They can't enforce changes in the curriculum. They can't insist on DEI policies. They can't insist on nonsense like gender change and stuff like that because the union won't permit it because they're in a very weakened position. So this is one of those changes that's happening underneath the radar, and it's very, very important in the changes that are taking place.
So, Dick, more and more with the unions now getting weaker, and as I brought up, or you did, whatever, a couple of weeks ago, how it's going to be one, maybe two elections, presidential elections, that we're going to hold power, the conservatives, the Republicans, more and more that's happening with the union. We were talking about the young people voting and turning.
I think that's true, but at the moment...
It's going to be hard for them to pick up again.
At the moment, I'm a little concerned about the 26th election.
Why?
Because the early polls show about a 3-point Democratic edge in what they call the generic ballot, which is all things being equal in your district, would you vote for the Democrat or the Republican for Congress? Now, it's early, and the economy is not great right now, and it's going to recover very much in the next few weeks.
This is midterm election? Yeah. Okay.
And it's going to be much better in the future. And I think the economy will become really good by the time the election comes. But I'm a little concerned about that.
Well, you're a pole guy, that's why.
Yeah.
You should be a pole dancer.
Yeah, right. So
don't be concerned. I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Well, it's only a few point margin, but
just like I can't be sure that we're going to pull, red states where I said there were. You can't be sure of it, but it just looks like conservative people are really rising up more and more.
And everything is working in our favor. The economy is doing nicely. It's turned around. There is no threat of
this
recession.
Tariff thing is going to work.
The tariffs are working. The tax cuts are going to pass.
The border
is secure.
Right.
I can't see Trump losing seats. And also, most of the retirements in Congress are Democrats. So these will be open seats that the Republicans will be picking
schools, the way we just talked about that happening.
Yeah.
So many gangs. He's getting rid of the gangs, deporting people that want to kill us.
Yep.
And we got 30 seconds left. So I have to say, it's an honor to be here with you, Mr. Moore.
Fun. These shows are great.
Not bad. And thank you, Luis Rosales. He's the Dick Morris of South America. Luis Rosales.
De nada.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
No. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
No. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.